Emoyeni bagiti kuyachisa. Emoyeni yetu kwengwanwami. Solo semoyeni bagiti kuyachisa. Singetu emoyeni kwa kubuhlungu.
I had a discussion or an interview with Chief Vezi Maduna Mafu. It was Chief Nhlanhla Yamangwe Ndiweni. In the past few days, we have seen letters flying around. First, it was a petition where the chief actually petitioned Emmerson Mnangagwa, the president of Zimbabwe, telling him that it's time he addressed the Gukurahundi commission, the Gukurahundi issue by actually setting up a commission that would look into the issue. We then saw another letter which the chief was now writing to United Nations saying that President Emmerson Mnangagwa has ignored him and he has not received a response. Therefore, he is now writing to the United Nations so that the United Nations can set up a committee to look into the Gukurahundi genocide. The Gukurahundi genocide has been an issue for the last 38 years, and people have been talking 36 years to be specific. And now the chief is saying before he dies, he wants to make sure that the Gukurahundi issue is addressed. So I took time to go to talk to the chief to actually ask him whether he was the one behind the writing of letters, because there are some people saying, these letters are fake and all those kind of things. So we wanted to get it from the horse's mouth, what the chief himself says. We also had an opportunity then to talk to Chief Ndiweni, who also said he was behind the chief, he was supporting the chief, and he thinks that there is need for a commission of inquiry. So enjoy the program. He says, "Uti labizwa umlocho lapha ngemva kokuthi kubhalwe incwadi."
Ya, sabizwa umlocho lapha ekhuluma ngalokhu ukuthi wezwa kuthiwa sahambe eHarare. Sithi hayi nxa sihambe eHarare isikhathi esiningi kodlula lapha usitshela ukuthi ubizwe eHarare bakubizelana bese sikutshela thina ukuthi hayi lapho kokhuluma uthi utshiye lokhu lalokhu ngoba kwesinye isikhathi awukwazi ukuthi babedinga into bezidingela ukuthini. So thina siyakwazi njengabantu abakhangele ze-security ukuthi umuntu onjengafanele aphendule izinto kanje.
Lina la kuthatha njani ukubizwa lokho?
Ngakuthatha nje ukuthi umuntu ongani uyangicebisa kodwa efuna ukuthi kumbe angangenza ukuthi ngesaba ukukhuluma iqiniso ngathi hayi.
Lina njengomuntu omdalela abona indaba yeGukurahundi le lingasitshela ukuthi lizwa njani ngayo?
iGukurahundi yababuhlungu kakhulu ngoba abantu babeshiselwe ezindlini. Abanye umama ezithwele adatshulwe isisu umntwana wele lapha phansi lahla wakhe. So abantu abanjengoJuda Masina babhodalayo bembhodisa abantu lapha bethi nangu umkhokheli wamadizidenti nangu umkhokheli basebesiyamngena sembisela ngekhaya. Sengelile egumeni laphana bamdubula ngombhubhu wahle wawela phansi engazange akhulumela abantu ekhaya. So into ezinjalo zasidubha kakhulu. Kwasukusithi ngapha eBhalakhe ngapha ekhesi babulala abantu bebaphosela emgodini. Abantu labo lakhathesi amathambo abo abolile khona phana. Ngifuna ukuthi abantu labana amathambo lana akhutshwe bayangcwatshwa kuhle izihlobo zabo futhi lezi hlobo zibhadalwe ukuthi zabulawe labantu ngendlela yona leyana eyenzakalayo efana lemaguswini.
Lina selibe ngumkhokheli wabantu from isikhathi samakhiwa kuze kuzofika umbuso wabantu abamnyama. Umehluko wakho na wempi yenkululeko lokho kwenzakala eGukurahundi likubona njani ukuthi abantu bahlutshwa ngamakhiwa baphinda bazohlutshwa ngabantu abamnyama?
Lokho kwazisa ubuhlungu kakhulu ukuthi ihlukuluzwe ngamakhiwa siphinde sehlukuluzwe ngabantu abamnyama. Thina sesithi sesizibusa. Sezukuzibusa kwethu kungaphelelanga ukusilela ngenxa yokuthi sasethuselwa sibuswa ngokwethuselwa.
Belingumkhokheli ngesikhathi kubusa amakhiwa lapha bekunjani?
Ya khonapho kwabanzima kakhulu anti mina abalwa lami sibilami ngibisana labo ngoba izinto eziningi zasisaba ukuthi zimele abantu kodwa mina ngakhulumela abantu kwaze kwenza ukuthi ngingena amajele angu-10 izimbabwe yonke la ecourt ngangena kathathu i-charge ngaphansi kwe-Law and Order Maintenance Act kodwa ngaphuma discharge emakhotha akhona ngenxa yokuthi angilamagqwetha engangiwasebenzisa lo mlimi wangimela ngaleso sikhathi badinga amacala kimi baswela.
Ngemva kokuthi iZimbabwe sithole uzibuse abantu abamnyama sebebulalana kuliphatha njani khonokho?
Kubi kakhulu ngoba thina sasilwela ukuthi singabulalani kodwa siphathane kuhle, sibusane kuhle, kodwa yisikho okwenzakalayo ngaleso sikhathi abantu baqala ukuthi babulalane, okwakuyinto engafanelanga ukuthi yenzakale.
So lina kuyini elikukhangelele ukuthi uhulumende ekwenze ngesiga lesi?
Uhulumende lokhona kade singikhangela ukuthi alungisise into yegugrawundi, abantu labana abafelwayo izihlobo zabo babhadalwe ngenkomo ethile ngefamily. Kungaphela lokho sibona umoya lwana uzaphela ngoba uhulumende lawo uyabe sebhadale lapho aphambanisa khona abantu.
Uhulumende ujala ukuthi yena kule commission le kaNari le ezakhangela ngakho khona.
Hayi, commission kaNari hayi asiboni ukuthi ngaphatha lolu daba kakhulu ngoba futhi labantu abangasibo bakithi lapha abakhethwa yilabana abantu ababulala abantu. Yikho abantu abanjalo kasibathembi, sithi hayi i-commission leyo kayibuyele eceleni sizisebenzele thina udaba lwethu.
Aliyesabi ukuthi uhulumende lo kukhona ngakwenza kini?
Simesaba uhulumende anti wasona. Umuntu oyona umuntu yesatshwa yena nguyofana sikolisa ukuzahlalisana lathi kuhle.
Kodwa sarike labikela nalini lezinye izinduna khona ukuthi njengezinduna likuba
bikelana sibili ngakho lokho. Izinduna sebezilami kule ndawo labo mdladla nje owayo khona aphondiwe. Indoda ubona nje so indoda amadoda ngiyadlala basopho babo
litho njalo kodwa
bayakwazi ibizo lakho leliya
liphi mntontana
ethi induna yamawathi
iyatshisa leyo umdladlo odla amandla
osamandla
nansi indaba enhle
selidecide ukuthi libhale incwadi lapha libhale le United Nations. Kuyini elikukhangele ukuthi United Nations ikwenze?
Sibhalele i-United Nations ngoba sibona ukuthi udaba lolu inzima ukuthi uhulumende alungisele udaba olunje ngoba yena nguye wadala konke lokho esikhuluma ngakho. So i-United Nations yeza lamhla kuhle into yona ilungise iphele ngenxa yokuthi inhlanganiso emele izizwe zonke zomhlaba, imele inhlupho zonke zomhlaba wonke. Lapho kuphambanisana khona izizwe, i-United Nations iyangena ilungise. So sithemba ukuthi olethu udaba salungiswa ngoba balungisile ezinye izizwe.
Sike sayezwa amahungahunga ukuthi sike sezwa kuthiwa i-Chiefs Council ekhokhelwa nguCharumbira izama ukuthi libambe udaba lolu lingalithini.
Lokho ayisikho kwabo lokhu bancane kakhulu entweni enjalo. Xa sise-United siphezulu lekhatshana uCharumbira kasafiki khona la ngawela phansi ngokuphansi kakhulu angaze akakhwela efika phezulu e-United Nations. I-United Nations yeza lungisa udaba lwelizwe luqede luphethe.
Njoba lisiya ku-council le ama-chiefs le, so akula thuba lokuthi indaba le ingakhulunywa ngakho?
Babekhulumani ngabantwana labana abantu abancane kakhulu, indaba yakhona inkulu kokuthi vele ayibale ngana. Babekhulumani khulume ngento angazoziyiqede, thina into zaqeda inkulumo njenge-United Nations izaqeda.
What's your take on this whole Gukurawendi issue?
It's a very, very serious matter. It is one that has been hanging over this country for many, many years. We are at least 38 years down the road after independence. And yet it is 36, 38 years after we are now beginning to get to grips with it. It is a profound issue that needs closure. We need to resolve certain issues. As a country, as a people, as a nation, we need to mature. So really, I take it very, very seriously indeed. And it is good that the elder chief amongst us chiefs, Ugodwayo, has taken the courage to at least give us that direction from where we're going with it. So that is my position on it.
You remember that sometime early this year, there was the first meeting which was done by the National Peace and Reconciliation in Bulawayo, and there was a bit of chaos, and you had an opportunity to talk to them there.
Yes.
What was your words of advice to them?
My words of advice to the commission there was that I said to them, really, number one, the commission is fundamentally flawed. It's fundamentally flawed from the simple situation that you cannot have the perpetrator dictating terms to the victim. There's no such justice in the world. More importantly, that left out a huge swathe of people who could have had an input into this commission. For example, traditional leaders, elders, victims, all of those things. But what I found most offensive in this whole matter was that the way the commission was formed up, there were no representations from us down over here. So instinctively, that means that that commission is fundamentally flawed. And then the other thing which I find very insidious in this whole commission is the fact that it is trying to combine Gukrahundi with other disturbances in Zimbabwe. Gukrahundi, or shall I be specific, genocide, stands by itself. You cannot dilute genocide. Genocide is a serious accusation. It is the most heinous crime known to mankind, and it needs to be given that respect. And that is why when you say the word genocide, instinctively you're bringing in procedures, protocols, rules, legalities. All those things are there in place waiting to deal with such issues. So we must not be fooled by commissions. This commission is a waste of time. For us, we want justice. We need to be mature and old enough to say, where does this go? And for me, when we're talking about the genocide issue, I prefer to call it genocide. Some will say Gukrahundi. But I think if I stick to the term genocide, it provides clarity in people's minds of what it is that we're talking about. The elder Chief Maduna gave some examples, dreadful things. So for us in genocide, really, number one, we have to accept that there has to be trials. When you say the word genocide, that means there will be people who will be incarcerated in jail. Those are the norms of genocide. When we're talking about genocide, it is the victim that will dictate the terms, not the perpetrator. In Zimbabwe, we've had a travesty of justice whereby the perpetrator has been trying to dictate how this thing is resolved. We have tried it a number of times. It is good that now it has been elevated to the United Nations, because after 38 years, we clearly have failed. And after 38 years, we're now coming up very close to a time frame which was put in the Constitution and the law that if this matter is not dealt with within 4 years from now, it becomes prescribed. Now, how can you put a prescription on a matter like genocide? If someone steals an orange in Pick n Pay, that is a crime for many, many years to come. And yet here we are, 20,000 plus people have been killed, and you're saying if it's not done within the next 4 years, that is it, we can't talk about it. So really, I'm very strong and passionate about it to say the United Nations and international bodies must come in to this arena, must take over this matter. We have played around with it too much. And the Elder Chief is right. The National Chiefs Council has no place in discussing this. It really does not have any place. My advice to the President of the Chiefs Council, Chief Charumbira, is that he needs to step aside because he's touching something that is incredibly sensitive. And there will be repercussions to it. Because if I could talk you through, let's just say the Chiefs Council takes it on board. It has no terms of reference. It cannot handle it. It does not know where to go with it. But what will happen is that it will divide the Chiefs Council. We are walking into a Pandora's box whereby the National Chiefs Council can be destroyed by this issue. So my advice to the President of the Chiefs Council he needs to step aside and not put the National Chiefs Council in an impossible position. For us, we will be taking an incredibly high-handed road on this map to say we will not tolerate this thing happening. We are aware that in the past, politics came into this issue. That is why it has taken so long to resolve. We are also mindful that the President of the Chiefs Council, Charambira, is yet again bringing politics into this. Genocide is genocide. It is a serious matter, and we need to handle it in that particular way.
If you had to give direction on how you want this thing to be handled, there's chiefs in Matabeleland, what would you advise?
I would be advising that we can get a college of chiefs together. Those colleges of chiefs there will be supported by other people there, victims, and even from the clergy, people will come in from that. But because of the complexity of the genocide in Zimbabwe, we will need experts. And those experts will emanate from such bodies like the United Nations, from such bodies like Amnesty International, from such forensic institutions, pathologists, who have an experience with dealing with genocide. Because normally the perpetrator of genocide will try and conceal the evidence. So we're looking at a whole gamut of people who can come together to deal with it. But paramount to this whole issue is that the genocide issue should be steered from an international perspective. It cannot be steered from a local perspective. If we do that, we are playing, we're wasting times, we're damaging people's feelings. It must be incredibly difficult for a survivor of the genocide here to go to a supermarket to do their local shopping, and next to them in the other side of the till is someone who they recognized perpetrated violence upon their family. That must be incredibly hard. And it's not even just the physical violence. Genocide is still continuing because we have not resolved it. We are now looking at cultural genocide. We're looking at academic genocide. We're looking at marginalization. Marginalization comes from genocide. The only reason why marginalization within the south of the country is so prevalent is because the issue of genocide has not been resolved. Had the issue of genocide been resolved, we would have parity in Zimbabwe with regard to expenditure. We would have parity in Zimbabwe with regard to employment. We would have parity in Zimbabwe with regard to the commerce and industry and all those things. But because this issue has not been dealt with, it has given birth to all of these issues which are testing us today as a nation. So really, in a long way answering your question, it has to be steered from an international arena by experts, and obviously there'll be an input from local chiefs and local other people we can bring in together who have specialities, civil society, NGOs, the clergy, all those people, so we can do a proper thing.
Lastly, do you think this government is going to, is in a good position to address this issue? Because the same perpetrators of this violence are the ones who are in government now.
Listen, let's be truthful to each other. When the genocide occurred, the government of the day of this country was ZANU-PF. We fast forward, it is 2018 now. The government of the day is still ZANU-PF. Yes, there's been some changes in who sits in what chair, but in essence, the same organization is still there. It is impossible for the issue of this genocide to be resolved by this government. It is impossible. It has to be resolved from outside this country, from the international perspective. Then we'll get justice. Anyone who takes a different view to mine, thinking that it is possible, is really wasting their time and does not have the hearts, the interests of the people of this country at heart.
Lastly, we have seen the letters written by Chief here, and we've seen the authorities trying to call him in. What's your comment on that?
I'm greatly disappointed by that. Incredibly disappointed by that. That is why really I supported wholeheartedly the letters that came from here to say that at least our elder chief, his name is recorded international-wise, so that he's accorded the status and the protection that comes with that. We want to protect our elder chief. What Lotwa did at the local police station was unspeakable. You cannot force-feed a traditional leader words to say. That is totally unacceptable whatsoever. And besides, that was totally above his league. For us, we're saying we need to maintain this agenda so that at least it is resolved properly and in a proper manner. But also we are mindful that really there are people, even today in Zimbabwe, who do not understand the seriousness of this matter. If the government of the day would like to be afforded the international status it wants, if the government of the day would like commerce and industry international-wise to be open to them, they have to address this genocide issue. You cannot step aside from it, over it, under it. It has to be stepped. It's one of those conditions. We saw it very clearly when we were looking at the Democratic Republic of Congo, when they were looking at issues of the blood diamond. All the diamonds that came from that country were not bought because they were told it is blood diamonds. Likewise in Zimbabwe. The government, yes, one will say it's a new dispensation, but the government has blood on its hands. So long as that stays in that particular way, there will be a difficulty in re-engaging the international arena. So I would implore those in positions of office in our government to adopt a pragmatic way about this and to have courage. Because as I said in my initial answer to you, to have courage that some individuals will be incarcerated. That is what genocide does. It is impossible to think we can deal with this issue and no one is incarcerated. And when I say incarcerated, I'm not speaking in terms of vengeance or revenge. I'm talking in terms of what procedure, protocol, terms and norms of dealing with genocide in that particular way.
To all those who have been doubting whether the letters that have been circulating on social media were written by Chief Vezi Maduna, or if Vezi Maduna had the knowledge of these letters, I think you now have the answer. We talked to him and he confirmed that yes, he was behind the letters and yes, he wanted the issue of Gukurahundi to be addressed. What was interesting to me as well was the issue of saying that no, this issue cannot be discussed by the Chief's Council because Chief Charumbira doesn't know anything about Gukurahundi. So this is quite interesting coming from the chiefs, because for a long time people thought that maybe the chiefs were benefiting from ZANU-PF. They were not interested in the issue of Gukurahundi. But these two chiefs are making it clear that the issue of Gukurahundi needs to be addressed and need to be addressed now. I'm not sure what to say. I'm not sure what will happen. But what I've observed is that in the last few months, the call for justice when it comes to the issue of Gukurahundi is growing louder and louder. And I can feel it, that one of these days, something is going to give in. Because I can bet with my last dollar, the next conflict in ZANU-PF will be around the issue of Gukurahundi.